Dr. Seneff is a senior research scientist at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. She has a BA from MIT in biology, maybe that's a BS, with a minor in food and nutrition, and her PhD from MIT is in computer science. Dr. Seneff is the first author of several recently published papers and was cited in Prevention Magazine's April article called MIT Paper Links Chemicals Used on Genetically Modified Foods to Infertility and Cancer. On a personal note, I would like to thank Dr. Seneff for her courage in speaking out publicly against glyphosate. She is now under attack professionally by the corporation that manufactures glyphosate. And I think she should be commended for her moral courage, and we're very grateful to have her here tonight.
Back in 2007, I got really worried. I've been watching the autism rates steadily climb over the last 20, 30 years. 2007, I said to myself that I need to take a look at this. Somebody needs to figure out what's happening here. There's clearly something in the environment, probably multiple things in the environment that are causing this. And as a biologist, I maybe could try to figure that out. And so I studied it. I watched the rate go up and up. Now, 2009, 1 in 100. And the most recent number, March 2013, 1 in 50. This is getting to be a very, very worrisome number. And autism is not a trivial thing to have. For those of you who know people who have children with autism, it can be a very severe disability. I project at this rate 1 in 2 by the quarter-century mark. So half the kids born will be on the autism spectrum if we stay the course. So we need to figure out what it is in the environment that's causing this, and we need to fix it. Very clear to me. In 1970, the rate was 1 in 10,000, which is a sobering thought. So I started looking into it. I did a lot of research. I actually wrote several papers. I have collaborators, maybe 6 or 7 papers on autism before I had looked into glyphosate. So I identified a lot of things. Other people have identified these things as well. Autism is very complex. And one thing for sure is that it's associated with disrupted gut bacteria. They have a lot of problems with their digestive system, inflamed gut, leaky gut. And this is connected to the gut-brain through the great gut-brain axis to the brain. So I told the story, I wrote a paper with collaborators, told the story of how once there's a problem with the gut, how it can then cause effects on the brain that can explain autism. I was frustrated when I wrote that paper because I said, I don't know to myself. I don't know what's causing this gut problem. Other things, depletion in serotonin supply. This is also associated with a lot of other conditions that we're facing today, and I'll say more about that in a moment. And then deficiency in sulfur metabolites and a major disturbance of the whole sulfur system in the body, which is a very serious problem that I think is the most important contributor to the brain dysfunction in autism. So the question, is there a toxic substance that's currently in our environment on the rise in step with the increasing rates of autism that could explain this? The answer is yes. I'm quite sure that I'm right. And the answer is glyphosate. This is the paper that I wrote with Anthony Samso. I was very fortunate to be able to hook up with him. He's a brilliant man. He's been studying glyphosate for many years. And he just started pouring papers at me, and I would get up in the morning and read glyphosate papers all day long and then drop into bed exhausted at night to figure this out. It was astonishing what we found. You can read this paper. You don't have to, it's not a pay-per-view, it's open access, so you can go find it on the web and read it for yourself. And there's also things written about it that might help you to understand it. Glyphosate suppression of cytochrome P450 enzymes and amino acid biosynthesis by the gut microbiome, pathways to modern diseases. Glyphosate. Roundup. You all know about Roundup. Probably you don't. Many of you know the word glyphosate, but that's the active ingredient in Roundup. It looks like that, a very, very simple molecule actually, very deceptively simple. It's now the #1 herbicide used in the US and increasingly around the world. It was developed by Monsanto in 1970 and it was introduced into the US market first in 1974. It came out under patent in 2000, and after that it became much more available worldwide because the price dropped. So now China is using a great deal of it as well. It's going around the world, increasing everywhere. And it's become the #1 herbicide in use because of its cheap price now and also because of its quote-unquote non-toxicity. What it does is it inhibits this shikimate pathway, and this is a pathway that's involved in the synthesis of these 3 aromatic amino acids. This pathway exists in plants, and it doesn't exist in human cells. So Monsanto argues that it's safe because of that. Now, the interesting thing is that the huge expansion of GMO corn, soy, cotton, sugar beet, and canola crops has led to the sharp increases in glyphosate that we've seen because 90% of the GMOs, there's many GMOs, and 90% of them involve resistance to Roundup. The GMO makes the plant resistant so you can spray Roundup on it and it won't die. And what that means is that you do spray Roundup on it and it soaks up the Roundup and it gets into the food system. And that is a very, very serious problem. It also affects the plant and decreases its nutritional value. Is it non-toxic? And as I said, Monsanto has said it is because we don't have that pathway. The important thing is that our gut bacteria, all of them, have this pathway. And we depend upon them to supply us with the amino acids that are produced by them in this pathway. Because we can't make those amino acids. We can't make them because we don't have that pathway. Those amino acids are extremely important to our health. And then there's other ingredients in Roundup that greatly increase the toxic effects of glyphosate. A lot of the studies are done just on glyphosate, and it can't get into the cell. But if you add the surfactants that are in Roundup, then all of a sudden the glyphosate becomes much more toxic. And the insidious effects accumulate over time. So one of the things is that the studies that Monsanto has done last typically for 3 months. After 3 months, you don't see any problem. Problems start to appear at 4 months. The study was done over the entire lifetime of rats, found a huge number of problems with cancer and a shorter lifespan and lots of difficulties with these rats that were exposed to glyphosate throughout their lifespan. So here's some biological effects I mentioned already. Aromatic amino acids, also methionine, that's the core sulfur-containing amino acid that supplies sulfur to your body. It disrupts gut bacteria, and that's been shown in chickens, cows, and pigs with this overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria in the gut, which is the same thing you see in autism. It disrupts these CYP enzymes, and these enzymes are really important for many biological functions. It depletes several important minerals, and especially these rare manganese, zinc, cobalt, iron, molybdenum. These are really, really important minerals to keep your enzymes working properly. And then it impairs sulfate synthesis and sulfate transport. And one of the major things with autism is a severe deficiency in sulfate in the brain. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about these two here on the next page. This one is these aromatic amino acids. Tryptophan is one of them. It's a precursor to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin, and these are really important neurotransmitters in the brain. Deficiencies are associated with obesity, autism, Alzheimer's, depression, and violent behavior. Melatonin controls the sleep-wake cycle. Tyrosine is another one of these amino acids, precursor to dopamine, adrenaline, melanin. You've heard of these words. These are really important biological molecules. Dopamine is going to go to Parkinson's disease if you're deficient. Melanin protects you from UV, so you're going to get skin cancer. Methionine is the essential sulfur-containing amino acid that supplies sulfur to your body. It disrupts these enzymes, which are involved in a huge number of things. Here's some things that I would mention. Vitamin D regulation, vitamin D activation, cholesterol metabolism, that's why people have high cholesterol. Sex hormones, that's how you can get into things like infertility. Bile acid production to digest the fats. Detoxifying other environmental toxins is really important. When you disrupt the enzymes that detoxify the toxins, the other toxins become much more dangerous to you. And then stabilizing the blood. You have a lot of problems with elderly today fighting a tight wire between hemorrhaging and blood clots. And they're all on Coumadin because their blood is not functioning properly. That's cytochrome P450 enzymes. So here's some biomarkers for autism. I mentioned the gut bacteria, inflammatory bowel, low sulfate, methionine, that's the sulfur amino acid, serotonin, melatonin, aromatase is the CYP enzyme. These are minerals. And then these other things I've talked about in the paper, they're a little bit harder to explain. All these things can be explained by glyphosate. So, to summarize, autism rates have been increasing at an alarming rate in step with the increases in glyphosate application to the GMO products, foods. Autism is associated with disrupted gut bacteria, serotonin deficiency, impaired immune function, sulfate deficiency, etc., all of which can be explained by glyphosate. They can also explain many other modern diseases and conditions.
If I was to summarize my feelings and my research and the research that I see in the peer-reviewed scientific articles, looking at our health factors, to start with, the things that we're seeing in our soil, in our plants, in our homes, and our barns aren't normal. You go back 40 years, and I have the privilege of doing that. They're not normal. A lot of our young scientists think they are, and consequently they don't understand and appreciate how we used to grow our plants, produce them, and what the quality used to be. Our health factors alone are overwhelming our health facilities, our capability of meeting the needs of our people. I think that future historians may well look back upon our time, write not about how many pounds of pesticides we did or didn't apply, but about how willing we are to sacrifice our children and future generations, all for this experimental process that we called genetic engineering, that's based on failed promises, flawed science, just to benefit the bottom line of a commercial enterprise.
If EPA has adequate data and wants to protect the public against known risks, the law creates obstacles to quick and effective action based on the Toxic Substances Control Act. Since 1976, EPA has issued regulations to control only 5 existing chemicals determined to present an unreasonable risk. That is 5 out of almost 80,000 existing chemicals. A 2005 study found 287 different chemicals in the cord blood of 10 newborn babies. Our kids are getting steady infusions of industrial chemicals before we even give them solid food.